It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce David Gilai,
Goudsmit, originally. Yes.
We're in your wonderful home in Ramat Gan.
Yes.
And David, if you could tell us a little bit about your family, your background, and about your mother and your father.
Mm-hmm. Fine. I am. My original name is Goudsmit, which is a Dutch name. I was born in 1942, in the middle of the Holocaust, in The Hague, or in Den Haag in Dutch. My mother was born in Germany. She came several years before the war to Holland and married my father, who was from original Dutch family. We were deported 9 months after I was born from The Hague to Westerbork, where most of the Jews were sent to, and from there it was almost their last trip, because in Westerbork almost every week a train came, usually on Monday night, and during that night or the day before, a list was prepared, and all the people who were on the list had to go on the train, and they were sent to, most of them, to their last station. There were about 90 trains who left to Westerbork. Most of them were sent to Sobibor and Auschwitz. And a few trains went to Bergen, which was a very special camp, because it was not an extermination camp. It was sort of a prisoner camp, which was meant or thought to which German thought to keep as a reserve in case that German citizens of other countries will be held by the Allies, so they could make an exchange with those people in Bergen-Belsen. Actually, what happened, such an exchange happened just once, and it's very easy to remember, because they exchanged exactly 222 people, which were the Templars, which lived in Israel, against 222 Jews in Bergen-Belsen, not one more, not one less. How they made the choice, I don't know. We were not on that train, of course. We came to Bergen-Belsen on February 1944, when I was a little bit more than 1 year old. And we stayed there until we were released by the English in May 1945. But a few days before the camp was released, the German took some 1,700 or something like that people, put them on a train. No. They took, they sent 3 different trains, which they loaded with Jews, and sent them to unknown places at that time. 2 of them were shortly after that released by the Allies, and the 3rd train went lost. It traveled through the bombed Germany with no known purpose. I think the Germans didn't know what to do with that, but we went on that train for about 14 days. During that journey, some 500 people died and were buried along the railroad, and those who survived finally landed at a forgotten village in East Germany, very close to the Polish border, called Trebitz. There the train stopped. It couldn't go farther, and the Russian who occupied the area released us. This train is known since then the lost train. We stayed in Trebitz 3-4 months, and then we were allowed to return to Holland.
I just want to ask you, David, at this moment, your father, unfortunately your father...
I was about to tell it now, I skipped it. During our stay in Bergen-Belsen, my father died. It was in February 1945, 3 months before the end of the war and the camp was released. It was the most terrible winter that Europe remembers during the last days, and this is for these were the few months in which most of the victims of Bergen-Belsen died. In Bergen-Belsen, some 16 or 70,000 people perished, most of them in the winter of end 45 and begin 44 and the beginning of 45. And so my father was among those people who couldn't stand, and he perished.
David, if you could just mention, because it's such an amazing story, about when your mother found out and she wanted to have the day.
Well, there is a peculiar story which my mother told me once. She didn't tell me almost anything, and most of what I know is from some researches which I made by myself and people whom I met later. But the one story she told me, and it is really documented, there is evidence that it is true. And the story goes so that on the day my father died, she went to some Jewish men in the camp and asked them to tell her what is the Jewish date of that day, because, as she told me later, she wanted me to know what is the date that I have to say Kaddish. Of course, it could be also, found later, but she wanted to know it, and she wrote it in 3 different places. One is on a picture which I show here, and here it says that Judah Hausmit, my father, died in Bergen-Belsen on February 16, 1945, which was the 3rd of Adar 5750 in Hebrew Tafshin Hey. And there are 2 other documents in which it is written. One was on the cover page of a Siddur, which I don't have now under my hand, and the 3rd place also. Years later, I found original documents which certified that my father died. And there was a surprise, because this document, here is one of them. In this document, it is mentioned that my father died on February 17. Here it's written. So where does this one day come from? How did this change happen? And today, in all original official documents, it's written that my father died on February 17. Not that it matters a lot, but that's the fact that there is a difference of 1 day, because between the evidence of my mother and all the official documents. But my mother told me how it happened. And what happened is that on the day my father died was a day where they got bread, probably once a week, or I don't know how. And it was of course rationed. And so my mother asked the men who was in charge of how you say
giving the rations. He was
to give her the bread which was intended for my father, and to write down that he died 1 day later. So he died on 16, and she asked that he will write in the books which he had to write, because they need to know how much bread to give. That he will write 17. So he will get 1 bread, which was at that time gold. So the guy said, okay, you know what? I will do it, but you get a half, I get a half. And that's what she did. So that's how this discrepancy came to be. And the only one who cares about it is me, because it's now, today, it's the 1st of Adar Aleph. So actually in 2 days is my yahrzeit, but since we have a
leap
year, I do it in Adar Bet, although there are several opinions that says that you have to keep the first one. Never mind. That's the story of. So we were.
David, can I just ask? You have now a picture also here when you were in Westerbork. If we could just show, this is a postcard.
Okay, of course I remember nothing of my stay, of all what happened to me, but in some way my mother managed to keep several documents, and to keep it through all the way from Westerbork, Bergen, Belsenand, Trebitz, back to Holland, and then then Aliyah to Israel.
And also on the train, on that.
Yes. And here is a picture of 3 postcards which were sent to her, or to us actually. To my father was alive at the time, and to Westerbork by 3 non-Jewish friends or neighbors who lived very close to us, and it can be shown here that I even know where we are in Westerbork, because it says here it says Goudsmit. This is the initials of my mother, Goudsmit, and in Barak number 70. I don't know if maybe somebody can till today show where it is. To those who don't know, Bergen Belsen is nothing to see. It's only a big graveyard. There is nothing was left because the British burned the camp down because of the typhus. So.
And I think there's a monument of.
There is a big, very big museum, which is another part of the story.
And David, you have a picture when you were a baby of.
Yeah, here is my mother with me. I'm crying. I don't know why, but babies usually do it. This is just before we were sent away, and this is much later. I think it is already in Israel. Yeah, it says. I don't see the year here, but here I am all 4 or 5. It's probably in Holland, where 4 or 5 years old. Okay. Now, actually, this is only an introduction, and the part of the story which I want to tell is not what happened. This is only the introduction, because all I know is only from what I heard and read, and I heard very little. But the fact was that after the war, we made Aliyah to Israel. My mother remarried, and like many Holocaust surviving families, she almost didn't talk about anything which is connected either to the Holocaust, and more even to my family. She never told me anything about my family. Few trivial details, but not how we lived and where we lived and what my father did. And I know that my father had, at that time, before the Holocaust, he had his parents were alive. He had a brother. They all perished, and that's all.
David, I just have to ask you, please,
Yeah.
if I it's very interesting. After the train that you were on, you landed up in Troyvitz.
Yes.
And then, how did you manage to get back to The Hague?
Actually, all the survivors were sent either to. All the survivors were sent back to the country of their origin. So since we were registered for as natives of citizens of Holland, we were sent over Germany back to Holland. Now to go back to Holland was not very so simple, because many people got sick, and they got typhus, and typhus is a very dangerous disease, and the Dutch wouldn't accept anybody who had typhus. Fortunately or unfortunately, my mother got typhus, and she hardly escaped, and I had to, and that was our luck. Because once you had typhus, you were immune.
Yeah.
And so at Troyvitz, she got a certificate. Here, this is a certificate. It's a piece of paper which is big, that big, and it says that my mother and me had typhus. So once you had this, with this we could leave for Holland. And we arrived in Holland. It was close to Rosh Hashanah of that year.
That was 1945.
45, yes.
And in Holland, your mother stayed with another lady?
Yeah. The Dutch had to find some shelter for all the people, and they were themselves. They were in a big shortage of everything, but they started to find solutions, and my mother actually, most of the people who came from Troyvitz were put together in some house which served for some public purpose. I don't remember. And my mother said, "I don't want to stay here. I want to get a flat of my own." But we were only half a family. There was another half family, a lady with twins, which were about the same age of me, and they came together, and together they asked for a flat, and they received one in Amsterdam. So after I lived my first years after Holocaust in Amsterdam with a half family, and here is a picture of the two young girls,
the twins,
which survived together with me, and the most peculiar part of the story is that later on, when they're all grown up, one of the two girls made Aliyah to Israel and married and settled in Beersheba. And about a little bit later, I married and settled in Beersheba. So we came together. There was a reunion, and we are together since then. And in some way, we regard each other as brother and sister.
And David, before we continue, I just have to ask you, you have this most incredible document from, this was from 1943.
Yeah.
If you could just expound a little bit about this unbelievable, amazing document how your parents were allowed to stay in The Hague.
First of all, the most unbelievable thing is that this document existed all, and that my mother has it. But it's the same with all other documents. She managed to keep these documents, and these documents in German, and everybody can see here. I'm looking. Yeah, see here the Nazi sign, the Gestapo sign, and it says that my father has a permit to stay in The Hague till later notice, until another, not indefinite, until they decide otherwise. That helped us. I can see here exactly. This was given on April 43, which was 4 months about after I was born, and on September we were deported. So for 5 months we could stay in The Hague until we were deported also.
Do you know why your father was given this document?
Yes, I know why. This is a story which I didn't know until quite recently, and the point is that when the Germans started to deport the Jews from The Hague, and for some reason they said that 20 families may stay. They needed them for work somewhere, some works to do. And of course, as they usually did, they decided that the Jews themselves, they ordered that the Jews themselves will decide who is going to stay. So the committee of the Jews decided that families with little babies or with pregnant women at least in the seventh month may stay. My mother was pregnant with me, but she was on her 5th month. So my father told her, go to the hospital, go to the gynecologist, and ask him to give you a certificate that you are in the 7th month, pregnant. So she went, and he said, I can do it. The German come and they check it and they look for it. I can do it. I can almost can give you is a note that you are probably in the 5th month. She was maybe in the 4th. So she came with that note, and my father said, that's not good. You go to the chief of the department and ask him to give you a certificate that you are in the 7th month. And you are asking you go to him, you say you need a checkup, and then you tell him what you need. And that's what she need, and he checked her up and said, Madam, you are okay, everything is okay. He said, Doctor, that's not the reason why I came. I came because you can save 3 people. Myself, my husband, and my baby to come. I need a certificate that I am in the 7th month. And she mentioned that he was a Catholic. And he gave on the spot.
Amazing.
So, this is a man who should be honored as Chassid Umat HaOlam.
Righteous amongst the nations.
But nobody knows, I don't know who he was. Okay, so...
and this is the document, and it's incredible.
Yeah, that's the document which says that, and that was given in April, and the order was a month or two earlier, just before that. So without that doctor, we wouldn't sit here now. Okay, so this is only the introduction of what I wanted to tell, because I am not in the position to tell what happened in Bergen, Belsenand, and Gilai. I was a baby. What I would like more to tell is how I got a family from nothing. Because when I grew up a little here in Israel, my mother told me nothing about my Dutch family. She told me quite a bit about her family, her parents, and cousins, and so, but nothing, almost absolutely nothing about my Dutch family. I said, okay. All what she told me was that the name of my father, of course, that he had a brother whose name was Solomon, and that his parents were called, my grandfather was called Joseph. I am called after him. My first name is after my other grandfather, David, of the Germany, and his wife was called Mitya. That's all. That's all what I knew about my Dutch family. As a child, well, you don't leave it. It's not so. It doesn't bother you too much. Although in the back of my mind, there was something missing. The first time when I made a slight attempt to find something about my family was when I was about 16. My parents, my mother and my stepfather, they took me on a trip to Europe. And actually what they did, we flew to Switzerland, and they sent me to Amsterdam, where my mother still had friends from the Holocaust. And those friends had a girl, some a little bit younger than me, and we stayed. I stayed with her family, and one day I told her, you know what I would like to do? I would like to go to The Hague and go to the Jewish community and see if I can find something about my family. He said, okay. No, excuse me, wrong. That was not on that trip. That was years later. That trip was not connected. It was years later. I was about 21 at that time. And so we went there, and we came to the Jewish community office. There was, at that time, there was still something like that. Now there is actually nothing. And there was a counter, and there was a guy after the counter, and I didn't speak Dutch, so that girl, she spoke Hebrew. She spoke for me, and she said, this is Mr. So-and-so, and he is from The Hague, and he wants to know if there is something. She didn't even know what to ask. And that guy behind, instead of starting to inquire, he said, there's nobody. We don't know anything. There's nothing. And after 2-3 minutes, it was done. Closed. Nothing, no information, nothing at all. Okay. So years passed. And nothing happened. Only one thing happened a few years earlier, which is I would say, a clue to something which happened years later, and that is that sometimes, I don't know why, and now from where, my mother told me that my father had a cousin who went to America and became a very, very famous professor. And his name was Samuel Houtsmith. Here I have a picture of him. I have a lot of information of him. This is one. I think this is where he gives a lecture at the end of his career. This is a man, and I will come to him later. Now, years passed, and in my mother had a brother who managed to escape from Germany just before the war. He married just that time, and his parents-in-law managed to receive a certificate to South America, and they went, 3 daughters, the young son-in-law, and my uncle and his wife went to South America, first to Bolivia, then to Argentina, and in year 1963 they made Aliyah. Of course, very, very big celebration. My mother didn't see her brother 20 years, more than 20 years. And we were in close connection. Stop it. Now, this uncle of mine, he was an encyclopedia of the German family. So all which somebody could know or could tell, he told me. I visited him many times, and he told me lots of stories. I recorded, so it's a shame. But I have a lot of information about my German family. And then at the beginning of the 21st century, it was 2001 or 2, his wife died. And after that, I even more visited him. He was alone, and he told me about the story more and more and more. And at some time I told him, look, it's very interesting all what you tell me. Now I want to see it with my own eyes, where you and my mother were grown up. Now he had a son and a daughter. The daughter lived in Israel, and the son went to live in Germany. So I made a plan. I told him, I take you to Germany, and you take me through all the places where you lived, and you tell me what and where and how, everything which I want to know. I want to see. And he said, what you are going to do? He said, yes. Okay, I arranged for the trip. We went together, and actually all the stories you could compress in a journey of 1.5 days, because these were a few locations which were quite close to another. But it was very, very meaning and important, and I saw with my eyes.
Had he been back to Germany, or was this the first time?
No. He had been back in Germany. Yes. That's not important for now. But the man left Germany in year 39, and I prepared. We hired a car, of course, rented a car. And I prepared maps where we are going to do, and at that time you have no ways, but I marked on a map the route and everything. No map, no nothing. After 50 years, now, it was say 39 to almost 50 years. He told me every point. He said, look, there is a turn. Now comes the bridge. Now comes the house. Unbelievable. And so, now the plan was, and here comes my story. My plan was that I leave him with his son. He will come back with his son to Israel. He was 85 years old at the time. And I go to Holland. And my plan was to go not to the Jewish community, to the municipality of The Hague, and see what documents they have in their archive. So this I did. I went. They have a very big, nice house where they manage the city, and I went to the archive where they have the registers, and the lady asked me what I want to do, and I said, look, my name is so, I was born here, the name of my father was this, and my grandfather was this, and I want to know, what do you have, can you show me about my family? She said, okay, you come with me. She takes me to a huge room where you have shelves from here to eternity, and in every shelf, each shelf was that long, so it was a deep closet, and in each shelf there were thousands of microfishes. So for people who are born in this generation, don't know what microfishes are. Microfiche is a card on which you put documents which are filmed, and they put them together they compress them. They are very, very little, something like this big, and they're about, I think, 6 times 8 frames on each card, and you need a special machine to enlarge it, and you can print it from the machine. So she goes to a shelf, goes to G, looks a little bit, finds a card which is on which it says Goudsmit, puts it, turns it over and says, look from here on. So I started to look from there on, and I stayed there 2 or 3 hours, and I had a family.
Wow. And this is the first time that you've seen it?
And I had a family. First time in my life.
This must have been so emotional for you.
Well, it's hard to be emotional when you are alone, but it was very, very touching. Now, what did I found? Here I show an example. How it looks. Just a second. Yeah, okay. So they kept their documents. They had a format for those documents, and each looked something like that. So on the left corner, on the top, it's written very big the name, the family name, and then comes the details of the people with the names, date born, where born, and many other details. And what I found here, this is one of the first documents which I found, is Goudsmit, Joseph, my grandfather, Goudsmit, Mickey, my grandmother, Goudsmit, Solomon, my uncle, and Goudsmit Judah, my father. He was the second son of them. And exactly written when they were, where they were born, and so on. But that was not all. I found that my grandfather had 4 brothers, 3 brothers and 1 sister. The document that shows it Okay, here. This is Houtsmith Moses, one of his brothers with his family. This is this is our family, Judah, and my mother. I was not born at that when this document was issued. This is Isaac. We come back to this man with his son and with his wife, his daughter Rachel, and his son Samuel. Samuel Houtsmith. Now I see the connection. This is the cousin who went to America. Well, I skipped something. I come back to that. Okay, and there was a third one, and there was a daughter who was called Clara, and she was she married, but he's not here at this document. So I have here the basis of the two generations above me, my grandfather, my grandparents, three brothers, and one sister, which were all registered. And with the time, I found more other detailed documents. I went. I don't think at that trip, but I went to the city from where my grandmother came. It is in North Holland. I made arrangements to go to the archive, and I got.
Which city was she in?
Den Helder, it is called. Den Helder. It's in the north, very north of Holland, and I got information from there also. Now I skipped one point, and this is actually what comes connected to what comes now. When I was years earlier, I made a trip to United States as part of my work. I landed in somewhere where there was a scientific convention. I don't want to talk about the subject. And a year or two before that convention, a Jewish professor from America came to Israel and gave a lecture about subjects in which I was involved. A very, very nice man, very important in his field, and he was very fromm, very religious also. He lived in New York, and he was professor in Columbia, so that's something. And in some way I got connected to him, and what happened is that when I went to that convention, I flew to New York, and from New York I had to take another plane. And on the way, when I went to the second plane, I met that professor who went to the same convention.
You didn't know beforehand that he's going to the convention?
No, just by chance. So we flew together, we sat together. At that time you didn't have to sign the seats before. And during the well, still there is something which I have to tell, which I forgot. Before that trip, I said, America, Sam Houtsmith, maybe I try to find him. How do you find a man, a professor? Maybe he's an important professor. Maybe my mother said he's an important professor. How do you find the guy? How do you know if he exists at all? So what do you do at the time? I don't know if you do, if you know. But there was in America at that time, now everything is on Google. At that time, the Google of persons who are important was a book which appeared annually, which is called Who is Who in America. And in that book, which was that thick, I think, or maybe it even had two
volumes,
bands. Everybody who had some importance was registered with a short note. I said, if he is important, he should be there. And these books were in the library where I worked. So I went to the library, and I go to G, and from G I go to SAM, and bingo, there he was. Sam Housemate with the details. He was born in Holland. The dates, the dates were more or less okay, so it's probably true. So with this knowledge, when we flew to that place, I said to that professor, "Did you ever hear the name Sam Housemate?" He said, "Yes, I know something about him. He is he became very famous because of a special mission which he led, but I don't want to talk about it." I said, "I have good reasons to believe that he is related to me. Do you think you can find him for me?" He said, "Well, I don't know, I will try." So I stayed in that place for about 2 weeks, and he went back home after the convention. And it was a labo. And one day, somebody comes over to me and say, "Mr. Gilai, there is a long distance call for you." Said, "Who is it?" He says, "Housemate." Wow, few days only. So I went to the phone, and I have no idea what shall I tell him at all. How shall I start to talk to him? Maybe it's not the man which I'm looking for. Then I went to the phone. I say hello. He says hello. And I say, "Look, before I start to talk to you, I would like to ask you, are you the person who I'm looking for?" He says, "Of course I am." But that was wonderful, but the conversation was bad. He was not. I was expecting to say, "Hey, where are you coming from? Where have you been all the time? What happened with you? What is your family? What is what happened to your father, to your mother?" Nothing. It was a dull conversation. He almost didn't show interest in anything. And the only thing which I managed to get out is I said, you know, well, he lived in Reno, Nevada. I was somewhere near the East Coast. So there was no way that I take a plane and go to see him. At the time, I had limited time. So I said to him, "You know, I would like very much to meet you, but I cannot do it now. But on my next trip, I would like to visit you." He said, "Yeah, welcome, please." Okay, and that was it. Because 2 years later, I think, I met that professor. He came again to Israel. And we spoke, and he said, do you know what happened with that relative of yours, Housemate? I said, "No, I have no connection." He said, "Well, nobody knows exactly what happened, but one day he went from his office to his car to go home, and somebody found him dead on the wheel." So I had no opportunity to meet him again.
Were you in touch writing letters, or did you correspond with letters before?
I had nothing from him, nothing. But, well, here and there I collected some articles about him and whatever. And then something happened, miracle, ness. At some point, I don't know how, I found maybe in some article about him, that he had a daughter, and she was a professor in Chicago, not in Chicago, not far away from Chicago, Ann Harbor. So I said, well, maybe at some time I try to get in touch with her. How I'll find a professor in Ann Harbor? I know her name. So I turned back to that professor who made the connection and said, look, what was her name?
This is his daughter.
Yeah, Esther Goudsmit, find her. It took 2 days. He sent me her address, a phone, and there was no email at that time. So now I have to get in touch with her. And how and what might be her interest? Her father was a cousin of my father, but she is second generation. What is her interest? I decided I write a letter, and I said I know exactly. It was on Tisha B'Av. That was a wonderful time to spend the last hours of Tisha B'Av. So I think I think it took me 3 hours to compose that letter, a few pages. And I told her, look, I'm this and this, and I would like very much to know and be interested if you could tell me something. And that was by mail. So I I calculated that a letter from here to America takes a few days, and if she wants to respond, and if she responds, that will take away, and then a mail to receive come back will ask so and so. So it should be latest if it takes her a lot of time to consider, say, a week to answer, on a certain day. If I get the letter at that day, okay. If not, probably it's nothing. You won't believe it. I got the letter on that day, which I guessed.
Wow.
And that was amazing. She wrote. She was enthusiastic. How happy she was, how surprised she was, and she wants to know, but she doesn't know very much, because her father probably didn't tell her much. Not probably, I know he didn't tell her much. But there is another cousin, second cousin, of another brother there is a daughter-in-law of another cousin of my grandfather. Remember, my grandfather had three brothers. One was called Isaac, which was the father of that son, and there was another who is called Abraham. He was the oldest, and he had a daughter, and that daughter had 3 sons who all survived and went to Australia, and the wife and 2 brothers passed away. And the wife of one of these brothers lives in Australia, and I should contact her because she manages the history and the genealogy of the whole family. Although it's not her family, but all the house meat she has it. So I contacted her, and that was a love from the first. When we get in contact, there is a bunch of letters. which I wrote her, and she wrote me back. And finally, we made a trip to Australia, and I met her. And
did you ever meet Esther as well?
Wait, that's the most important point. So I got from her a lot of information. We went back. We stayed in touch with her in letters, and she passed away several years ago. It's okay. Meanwhile, I found out there is a second cousin in New York. So I connected her too. And I was corresponding with Esther also. Wow. Esther is the some. So I wrote Esther a letter and say, look, I am going to go to New York, and I want to visit that other cousin of you and the second cousin, who lives in Long Island in New York. I contacted her, and I would like to meet you. Is it possible for you to come over to New York? And she said, yeah, okay. So we had a triple meeting at that cousin, but that lady, the new one, the one from Long Island, she was so friendly, so familiar. Well, she hugged me, but that one, that Esther, professor, and she wrote nice letters, but socially incapable, absolutely. So it was very, very hard to communicate with her. So we spent 3 days together in New York. She even took me to the institute where her father, in his late years, managed to be. He was leading the very, very important
journal
of the American Physical Society
for physics.
Yes, and he was very honored man there. So his successors, they know her, so she took me to that place also, and we went together in New York a little bit. It was not very much an issue, but at some point she tells me that in his late years, her father sent her a letter, and in his letter he tells her the history of his family. And she said, would you like to have it? I said, yes, why not? So I said, I sent it to you. So I went home, and 2-3 weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. This is the envelope. And that letter, which she tells, is a document of 45 pages. No, that's not, it's another one. But it is a document in handwriting of him. I have another, I don't know where it is at the moment, in handwriting, and he tells her in details. He wrote the letter in year 73. He left Holland in 27, I think. 50 years later, he tells about his parents, his grandparents, his uncles, which means the brothers of his father. One of them is my grandfather. He doesn't write very much about him. But he tells the branches of all the 4 siblings. He tells how life was in his own home, what's expected, and several other things. 45 pages. And I said, okay, now I know my Dutch family.
It's amazing.
So that's more or less completes the story.
And David, with Esther, was she religious or?
No. They all were not. Well, he also says, I don't know, I am religious because my mother was religious. The family she married was not religious, but she kept kosher and Shabbat. And after my father died, we came to Israel. From all the German family, one aunt of her survived. They made Aliyah before the war. And we, when we came to Israel, they accepted us on the first night. And we lived with them for 1 year until my mother married. So, and they were also religious. So it was no problem for my mother to keep again, to keep
and you were very close.
With whom?
With your mother's family. That's why your mother came.
Well, this aunt, I was very close. In some way, I regarded her as my grandmother, and they had no children, so I was actually their grandchild.
And is this the reason why your mother decided to come to Israel in 49?
Yes. She said, I have nobody, South America was out of question. So the only one which she had, and actually what happened is that they went to the Red Cross, not Red Cross, so Jewish agency, and they published lists of survivors, and they found her name. They found her name, not mine. They contacted her. So she made the decision to make Aliyah.
And David, here's just a picture. I think, was this maybe before you left?
No, this is in Holland. This is still in Holland. Here I'm, here I'm 5 years old. I have some here. A picture of that aunt of mine, not so important. Okay. Well, maybe this is connected to the story because when my uncle became 90, we made a party. Here, this is my uncle and my aunt. The uncle and aunt of my mother, I always regarded them as my uncle.
And it's because of them that you actually came here, that your mother decided to come to Israel.
Yes.
And you regarded her as your grandmother?
No, I called her Tante.
Yeah.
No.
And where did they live?
Rishon LeZion. This is my uncle, but there is a better picture. Should be a picture. Okay, this is a German guy who came specially to this party. He wrote the history of the location from where my grandmother came. This is my uncle. This is my real uncle. Yes, the brother of my mother.
The brother of your mother.
And this is a uncle and the aunt of my mother. Those who lived in Israel, who came to Israel before the war. Yeah, okay, this is...
And where did you grow up when you came here, after you landed in
We came to Israel, to Rishon LeZion with uncle and aunt of my mother, lived with them in their little apartment. And about a year later, during that year, she met my stepfather, and they married about a year later. He lived in Tel Aviv, so we moved to Tel Aviv.
And David, and you always grew up religious? You always...
Yeah.
And your mother, she always kept her emunah? She always kept
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what her emunah was. She kept her customs. Mm-hmm. No, but she was strict. It was kosher, it was Shabbat. Yeah.
So David, I just would like to ask you, what message do you give to your children and grandchildren And the future generations.
There is a pasuk in the Torah, in Parshat Ha'azinu, so one parsha before the last, and there is one pasuk which says, "Sha'al avicha v'yagedcha zekenecha v'yomru lach." Ask your parents, as long as they can tell you.
And you've always told your kids your background.
My children, they are aware of everything. Not that they don't fluently what I tell, but they know it all. Yeah. And well, this is maybe this will be the finish line and the third line of the whole story. When I was 70, my wife arranged a big party, and after that I decided to take my entire family to Germany, to Holland and Germany, what we call a Tiul Shorashim.
It's the roots to your heritage, yes. And your roots to.
So the plan was to go to Holland for a week, and for the next week to go to Germany. And we came on Sunday, I think, and we had a very nice week in Holland. I prepared a very detailed plan, and on Friday before Shabbat, disaster, stroke. My oldest son got a heart attack and was rushed to a hospital. We terminated our trip. I sent my family back to home the next week. Instead of, I canceled all what we planned in Germany. Shabbat we stayed in Holland, and me and my wife stayed with my son. And now you take your camera and go to that wall. And he was hospitalized for 4 weeks, and he didn't make it. He passed away a day after Rosh Hashanah, 8 years ago.
8 years ago?
Yeah.
And David, this is a picture of your...
Well, this is from our engagement, and my granddaughter took a lot of pictures from all our life and made a collage, they call it in French, of those pictures. So you can see all what we produced during the last 50 and some years.
And Kane and Hora, how many years have you been married?
How
many years have you been married?
Who counts? 68 till now. 50, nearly 50,
wow.
53 plus.
So David, I just want to thank you. I'm just going to come inside.
We are still online?
Yes, I just want to thank you. So David, first of all, I am so extremely grateful for meeting you. It's been such an honor and a privilege. Really, from the bottom of my heart, I'm so grateful to you. And I just want to show, this is a picture. I saw the same picture in Beersheba, yes, with Judith.
Of course.
With Judith, with the twins that you were, yes, in when you were back in yeah, Holland after, yeah, being in Bergen, yeah, Belsenand, yeah, on the train.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for Judith, because when she showed me the picture, and I said, is it possible to meet with you? And she gave me your number, and I am so extremely grateful, because meeting you and hearing the story with you and with Judith, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah,
how you built up your lives, how your mother and her mother, how they were so courageous. It's just incredible. And how you've it's just amazing to hear your story. Not only your story, your life and your family's life, and how you are so devoted to and how you managed to find the connections with your family. It is something unbelievable.
Well, you come from somewhere. So,
but how you recreated your family. It's something every person
the
should.
point is that it's very easy to go to the archive and to get there. But in the last 10, 20 years, there are also programs which...
But before that, you never had it.
Yes, but when they came, there was already a foundation of knowledge. And other people put it. So it was easy to build up a family tree. Here I have an example of but we should finish already.
Okay, but it's been amazing. I could go on and on. It's just incredible.
Yeah. Okay. This is which I prepared with a program which I put in a scientific program, if you like, and I put names one after the other, so I got a tree. Now just to have an idea, we are here in year 2000, and this is about 1100.
It's amazing.
But that's something which I got, the data I got from other people who put it on the internet. And I followed the line, and so I came.
So David, I really want to thank you, and I'm extremely grateful to you. And you should just admire stream to 100 in good health, nachas, and just all of Hashem's blessings. And we meet Daraba in Kolalev.
Okay.
David, thank you so much.
You want to take something with you? Or
I'm just so grateful to you, David. This has been really very special, and just
good.
Only Besorot Tovot, only good news and smachot and mazal and bracha.
Yeah, I hope.
David, you have a very special photo here. So this is the house where you were born.
Yeah.
And this is in The Hague.
Yeah.
And what year were you with your family?
What?
When you went back. What year was this when you went back? Was this picture taken?
This was 8 years ago.
8 years ago.
8.5 years ago, yeah. In 14.
Did you manage to go into the house?
Yeah, once. I was several times there, and once I stood there in front of the house, me and my wife, and there comes a couple and says, "What are you looking for somebody?" I said, "Well, you know, I was born in this house." And they said, "Really? We live in that house." And they said, "Would you like to see it?" I said, "Yes, of course." So they let me in, and I went through this house, a simple flat, and then I said, "Okay, here was my krieg, or how you call
it?
Yeah, probably."
It's amazing.
Well, meanwhile, we have some addition.
And it should just grow and grow, and
and I have grandchildren already, too.
Baruch Hashem.
Daughters, yes.